Can you turn to tab number 5?
是第五页还是它有边上那个就是 TAB tab 那个 table 是几
？tab
5是吗？
对 tab 5。
OK。我已经翻到了。
I already found it.
Are you at tab 5?
Yeah. 是的，是的。
Yes, I do.
Okay, so tab 5 is a witness statement, and then following on in the same
是事实
binder,
陈述吗？
following on in the same binder, at tabs 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, can you just flick through those, please, and confirm for the record that those are your 8 witness statements which you have filed in this case?
请翻开6、7、8、9所有这几页，然后看一下证人的证词。
可以了。
Yes, I'm ready.
Can you confirm that for the record?
你可以确定你刚刚有看到所讲述的这几页吗？
看到了。
Thank you.
Yes, I see it.
Today you've asked for a public hearing
今天
today.
是一个公正听
Can
证
you
会，
please explain why you have asked for a public hearing?
请问你可以解释为什么今天我们会开这个听证会吗？
因为在去年的2018年的那天晚上，
Because last
在
year on
检查的过
2018,
程中，发
1st
现
of
了检查
September,
人员的这个资质不符合，甚至
during
违规
the
操作，所以我今天必须要当着全世界的面，然后把这个过程和经过一五一十、清清楚楚、明明白白的展现给大家。因为在这个上诉的过程当中，因为由于规定和规矩性，所以很多东西我不可以向外透露，所以大家很多不知道，所以我今天要在这里举行公开的听证会，让全世界的百姓、我的粉丝，包括喜欢我的人，还有在座所有的每一个人，清清楚楚看到这个事情的过程。
During the whole issue on last year, 2018, September 4th, because all the incident is highly confidential, so I would like to take this opportunity to open this opening hearing to announce my statement to let the world hear me.
Thank you. You have, in your swimming career, received an only 3-month ban for doping. Can you please describe that event?
由于兴奋剂的原因，有处罚3个月的禁罚。
这个事情是这样子的，因为常
This
年
is how it
经历
goes.
游泳训练，因为我
Because I have been well trained for long
非常的
term,
从200、400、800。
so I have been well trained for 200 meter, 400 meter, 800 meter,
心脏承受负
to be able to afford all the athlete training.
我在多次比赛后是因为心脏不舒服，
So I have
躺在
some issue with
所以说当时
the heart.
也是在医生的
So sometimes I find that after the training,
这个治疗心脏的一个用药，而且当时是因为
and after the doctor
一个技术性的失误，
prescribed me the wrong medication.
然后才有这个事情的发生。
So in order to have an out of competition incident,
And can you describe how you made the mistake, so to speak, with regard to taking this banned substance?
为什么你会受到这个处罚呢？
因为就是当时因为
because at the moment
技术性的
there was a Chinese Swimming Association.
还是赛内和赛外，
So
因为一个这个技术性的失误，所以导致了这个事情。
he got mistake by uncertainly
可以绝对的保证，绝对不是
to
或者去触碰这些药物。
is not attempt to use the forbidden medication. So there was purely a mistake.
Now, you've asked for a public hearing, Mr. Sun Yang. You've filed no less than 8 witness statements. What we want to hear from you today, this morning, in direct examination is a very summary account of some events which took place in September 2018. So I'd like to take you to the evening of the 4th of September 2018. Can you please describe what happened when the officers who came to test you arrived?
那天晚上，我和我的家人。
Around
那天晚上，我和我的家人回到。
around the evening, I went back home with my parents. And the doorman informed me there was an inspection people. So my mother drive me to the front door. And the officer was shown out in my front door, and I was really surprised because we have encounter on 2017. So according to my experiences, that night we have 4 officers. So that was very weird to me. But I saw one of the officer, one of the DOC, she was not wearing professionally. So I was really highly suspected to follow the inspection of the urine and blood test.
I've just been handed a piece of paper by my Chinese co-counsel and said that the translator did not mention the word complaint, which you made, just for the record. Now, please, Mr. Sun Yang, we have limited time, so you're going to have to be more brief than you have been hitherto. So, there was an issue with regard to taking pictures that evening. Can you describe those events, please?
请你可以描述那天晚上拍照片的事件吗？
我们到了临时检查站以后，
We arrived the doping checking point, and we start the process of having blood testing. And at the moment, I realized the anti-doping assistants was filming in the room. At the moment, I request to see all the letter of authority and the letter of authorization. And during the inspection, I realized they don't have any authorized paper to prove their identification. Therefore, very soon I contact with my daughter, and also the association to inform this accident, which is going on, which is the leader of the China Swimming Association.
You received advice from them. What did they? Can you describe in very summary terms what they told you?
According to the expert, let's suggest me, in case they don't have any proven authorization, they are not allowed to bring away all the blood sample and urine sample. So it just simply, it's a urine. It doesn't mean anything.
But then describe how you gave blood.
不好意思，可以再翻译一下，没有听清楚。
Sorry.
请你可以描述你是怎么样给他们血液的，给他们
好，
血液样板。
我怎么给他？
How did I give it to them?
就你是怎么样把血液样板给他们的？
这翻译有点问题。
Would it help if I repeated the question?
Please,
Yeah, yeah.
please.
Can you describe how you gave blood? You questioned the accreditation of the people, but you still gave blood.
他刚刚的问题是说，你有质问他们的资格资质，但是你是怎么样给他们血液的？
All right.
因为尿检官
At the moment,
所以我当时就很礼貌地请他离
the
开了
DOC didn't prove the proven authorization and the letter of legislation. So at the moment, I double-checked all the information and identity. I consider the DOC should have a proper identification and authorization to execute the blood test. Therefore, my daughter arrived on the spot. But unfortunately, during the inspection of all the identification, we realized the DOC doesn't have a proven authorization and identification to process this blood collecting procedure.
Okay, so you've given blood and then you realize that the person who's taken the blood is not qualified. So then describe how you tried to resolve this issue.
当时因为已经
At
抽
the
完血液
moment,
了，然后我的医生到达以后，
we already done the blood check.
就和我们的浙江
So
中心副主任韩兆基
we discovered they are not qualified, so we inform Zhejiang Association
非常专业的一个专家，
and the specialties
的意见当时也
to ask for advice through the telephone.
没有证件，没有资质
They advise us if they don't provide
的检查样本。
any qualification and authorization, so they are not legal and allowed to go out with a blood test.
Okay, but you've given blood and they're not qualified. So please describe the events that followed that contestation, please.
请问这个事件是怎么样持续发生的？
当我把血液给他们以后，我的医生
When
赶
I
到以后，把意见
Handed to my blood test, so my doctor explained to them, DOC group of people, so the process took nearly 2 hours. I didn't understand what she was discussing and with who. In the middle, there were 2-3 times. There was a disqualified DOC and DOA. And the DOC should inform us, you can keep the blood. But I needed to go withdraw with the external bottle. That's what I have been told.
Okay, so if I understand your testimony correctly, you were invited to separate your blood from the equipment because they had to go back with the equipment. Is that correct? I'm sorry for leading, but the translation was so bad.
你再翻译的清楚一点，我听得不是很清楚。
好的。
谢谢。
他说
Can you please translate?
Yes，他说刚刚就是在这个事情发生当中，因为你是不同意他们把 这个瓶子带走的，但是最后是怎么样让他们分离这个瓶子，怎么样带走的呢？
不是我不同意，是我们
It
的
wasn't me
是我们的专
disagree.
家
It's because due to the expert who has been working long term, according to their experience, they advise us if they don't have a qualification, it's not allowed to bring it away, my blood test. They can only collect the material. So they told us it's up to you.
把外包装跟医疗废弃物代理。
If I can open the blood tube, I can just keep it, and they needed to take out the external bottle with them.
Okay, so now describe what happened outside with the blood.
在外面那个血液在外面是怎么样？你怎么样处理这个血液的？
当时我们在主
At the
检
moment,
在主检官的这个建议下面之后，我们就
we follow the instruction of DOC. We were looking for some tools. So my mother drove over to ask
门口的岗亭告诉我们
if the
的时候，我们
guidance
回来，
of the floor,
因为我们的小
if they have any advice.
在监控室
But in our compound,
我母亲就询问他们，
there are
这么晚了，
people monitoring the compound, and what happened to your mother to arrive at this late. So we back to the
这个过程中我们在
clubhouse.
保安自己
So during this period of time, the security guy didn't have any idea. So he was coming back with the tool because he was worrying about the blood tube, which is most important. The blood sample is very important. I need to wait for the professional to arrive to protect them, to bring it away. So the DOC suggests us you can bring it outdoor.
以后，我用
And when we arrive outside, so I use the flashlight to warn them. This is a very important, and this is a very, very important covered. At the moment, DCO arrived, approached to me, so I back to the guest house, doping checking point. So all the process has been monitored, has been watched by DCO. So she was witness the whole process.
Mr. Meeking, you have 5 minutes left.
你还有5分钟的时间
Sorry,
可以
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before you took the blood sample outside to do with what you've just described, who actually gave you the blood container?
谁拿了这个抽血的箱子？
OK，
好的。
是这样的，是当时
Actually,
当时主检官
at the moment, DCO told us all this explanation. So DCO took out the box, and the DCA would like to try to open the bottle of the blood vessel. So they consider to try to open that. Maybe there were a way to separate them. Therefore,
在整一个过程中，全部都是主检官和血检官自愿把血瓶交到我们的手上。我们没有
during the
任何人去
process,
碰那个箱子
the
也没有
DCO
人去
officer
打开那
and
个
the
箱子
BCA, they both agree
如何去
to
如何去打开。
how to operate to open the bottle, external bottle.
Thank you. So I'm a little confused with some of the abbreviations, but can you just confirm what I think you said is that the nurse gave you the blood container?
有点不确定你讲的话，请你再重新确定一下他们是怎么样打开这个真的。Excuse me, can you just repeat your question again, please?
我
稍等一下。
Yeah, can you please repeat the question again? We
Yes,
didn't
sure.
quite get it.
There was a problem with some of the abbreviations, but I just want you to confirm for the record that it was, if
OK，
I
我听明
understood
白
you
了，我听明白
correctly,
了，这个问题我听明白了。
Yes, I understood now.
是主检官和血检官他们主动把这个瓶子交到我们
It's
手上。
it was DOC and BCA. They provide us the external tube and blood check. They open the box and they attempt to open the external bottle, but it might not be easier to open. So she shake it. So she found out it might be the way we can try to open it from the bottom of the bottle. So she hand me the bottle, and I hand it to the doctor, and I hand it back to the BCA.
okay. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
That's Mr. Micken. Now, Wada Council has the floor, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Sun Yang. You say in your written statement that the doping control officer on 4 September did not declare to you that the legal consequences for
不
refusing.
好意思，那个翻译可以清楚一点，可以那个不要断吗？我听不清楚。
9月10号那一天，运动禁药官员。
Can you please repeat the question again, please?
You say in your written statement that the doping control officer
运动禁药官员
on 4 September 2018 did not declare to you the legal consequences of refusing to provide blood and urine samples. Do you mean that after all the times you've been tested, that you are not aware of the consequences for refusing to provide a sample?
如果你不提供血液，这样你会有这个后果。请问你知道这个事情的后果吗？
主检官和一行3人
DCO
从来整个晚上自始至终
and with the all compliance, they never told me about this speech. But based on how they behave, it's totally not professional and qualified inspection group of people. So during the whole night, they never mentioned about this. During the 2 hours, they were in and out and making phone call. I did not have any idea about what was going on.
But that's not my question. My question, please, is you've been tested approximately, or given approximately 200 samples. Are you saying today that after all the times you've been tested, that you're not aware of the legal consequences for refusing to provide a sample?
但是你没有被告知，如果你不提供血液，这样子你会有这个事情会有一个很严重的后果，你知道吗？
没有，自始至终
No,
整
I
晚
did
上
not.
主检官没有和我说过一样。
Never have I heard of this speech and confirmed.
If the
Question. Sorry, for the record, there's a problem with the translation. You asked that he's been tested 200 times, and that was translated into Chinese as to 200 milliliters of blood. So if you want him to answer your question, the translation must be correct.
my question is,
翻译老师，你把所有说的话，你让我能清楚的听到，谢谢。
Can you please just repeat again and help me
I'll
to
repeat my
understand better?
question. Over the last 6 years,
在过去4
you've
年
provided
当中，
more than 200 samples
提供200次
for purposes of anti-doping.
的事情，不同的
Are you saying today that after having been tested more than 200 times, you are not aware of the legal consequences for refusing to provide a sample?
在过去当中，你有200次被检测，使用抗兴奋测试，所以你有意识到，如果你不提供你的血液，这样子会有一些后果。你有意识到，如果你不提供血液，那这样子会有这个不提供血液的后果，你有意识到吗？
首先，主检官那天晚
First of
上
all,
没有跟我
The
提示过任何
DCO didn't mention about any possibility of a consequence. And during my career, and I have received 130 medal gold. And every single competition, we all have a thoroughly checkup. So based on the respect and based on the professional perspective, the DOC need to be qualified and showing proven identification. But DCO can profit as their power of inspection and they come to the sportsman. One question, if during the night, there was someone, a policeman came to your house and telling you, I'm the policeman, but I don't have my identification. How would you react? How would you believe?
Let me ask another question a different way. If the doping control officer on 4 September had warned you
不
about
好意思，这个 DCO 是什么？是尿检官还是血检官？你翻译成中文给我听，让我更加清楚听到问题。谢谢。
运动及药管理员。
不是，他是抽血的还是主检官？
主检官。主检官。
It's a doping control officer, yes?
if the doping control officer
OK 好。
DCO on 4 September had warned you about the possible consequences of refusing to provide a sample, would you have allowed her to take away your blood sample?
如果他那个时候告诉你，就是拒绝提供样本的后果，你会不给样本吗？
任何事情没有如果，事实就是那天晚上主检官
there's no
没有告诉我
consumption.
任何这样的事情。
That case, the day the DCO didn't mention about all these statements.
My question is, if the DCO had given you a warning about the possible consequences
告诉你这些后果的话，
of refusing to provide a sample,
拒绝提供样本，
would you have allowed the DCO to take away your blood sample?
你会不会让这个主检管拿到你的样本？
事实是那天晚上他就是没有
In
说，事情已
reality,
经发生
she
了。
didn't
如
mention.
果那天晚上
And
来
this
检
what
查人
happened.
员资质都
If
是
that day, all this group of professional people, they're showing their identity, it would not have been happen as today.
I kindly ask you not to insist on asking for his if, when speculation. We heard the answer.
When you first saw the DCO
看到主检管
on 4 September 2018, you recognized her from a prior sample collection?
你是不是认同了他？就是前面以前已经提供已经拿到了你的样本，你是不是认出他？
不好意思，请你再说一遍好，你的翻译不是很清楚，我听的不是很明白，不好意思。
Excuse me?
他说，2018年9月4号你见的主检管的时候，你有没有认出他？从前面。
当我看到他的时候，我认
When I
出
saw
来
her,
主检
I
官
recognized her at once. And this as a DCO has been recognized on 2016. So in my later of a complaint, so during this period of time, I did not receive any information or letter regarding to this issue.
And you knew she was with IDTM?
那你那个时候，你知道他是跟运动纪要管理官员在一起。
不好意思，你说什么？
IDTM 是这个吗？那个时候你知道他是跟运动纪要管理官员在一起吗？
我知道他是一名检察官，但是因为他被我投诉的时候，他是一个没有证件、没有资质的人，
Because I know
所以说我不确定他
she
来的
was
时候
from
他的证件
IDTM,
是否齐
but
全。
at that moment when she arrived, I didn't know if she has all the qualification and the paperwork to be able to prove.
So the DCO showed you the FINA authorization letter and her DCO card.
那个运动纪要管理官员有没有给你看的那个国际联合会反禁药？
I object.
不好意思，这个
I
翻译
have
能
to
再清
object
楚准
because
确一些吗？我
the
听得不是
word
很清楚。
authorization is not mentioned in what was shown to the athlete. It's letter of authority.
Sorry.
My question was, the DCO showed you the FINA authorization letter and her DCO certificate.
There is an objection. I understand we are talking about a letter of authorization, while the counterpart objects we should have a letter of authority
翻译给我
in
听。
this case. So what is the difference? Do you know? Is there a difference at your knowledge between a letter of authorization and a letter of authority? You have a large experience in blood collection.
他刚刚讲的是，就是通过你以前的经验，你对授权书和一般和委托书，你知道它们的区别的吗？通过你以前的经验，你对授权书和委托书，它们两个是你能意识到它们的区别？
当然，因为那天
Of
晚
course,
上
because
我只
that night
看到了
I only
FINA
seen
授权 IDTM 的
FINA
证书，但是我并
as later authorized authority.
跑到可以阅读所有的东西。
Because my reluctant English ability, I was not able to understand the whole document as long as I didn't see my name on the document, which was not shown at all in the paper. So normally, the DCO would show like an ID card, and each of DCO would have them. And also come with a later, as well IDTM later, and also has BCA has a proven identification and authorization. But unfortunately, during the night, I did not have seen any proven documents identification.
But after the DCO and BCA showed you their documentation when they arrived, you willingly provided a blood sample without any objection initially, correct?
那天晚上，主检官
During the
出示
night,
的是一个
DCO
身份的一个复印证件。
was showing me a copy of identification card. Why we use the paper one, or it's just to prevent their fraud of DCO has been remodified the identification. So during the night, I just saw the copy. And BCA just show a certificate. So I wonder if she is legal to do the blood sample. During the process, I gave all my blood. I promise us I am an athlete, so I follow what I asked to do.
And that's what the rules require, right?
所以这是对你的要求，对吗？
什么意思？
这是规则的要求。
规则是双方相互遵守的，并不是说一
The
方遵
law
守
has
一
been
方就可以去违反。
applied and respect by both parties. It's just not from one side.
But you did willingly provide a blood sample
你是有
initially.
主动地提供你的血液，你是有提前主动提供你的血液样板的，对吗？
那是我在配合。
Because I was following what they expected me to do.
And at that point, so far in the process,
在那个时
it
候，
was just like every other time
在那个时候，
you had given a blood sample, correct?
你有给予血液样板，对吗？
什么意思？您再翻译一下。
一直到那个时候，你是有给他血液样板的。
对，在我的医生和专家确认之
Because
前，
according to my
我一直
doctor
都是配合给他们
and
血液
also the specialist, they acknowledge all the consequences. So I follow what they expected to do by DCO and BCA. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to follow their request to do the blood sample because I tend to have a tendency to faint if I lack in the blood.
But after you willingly provided
你
a
主动
blood
提
sample,
供了血，提供了血
you
液
later
以后
refused
你有拒绝
to allow the DCO to take away the sample.
答应
Is
这
that
个
correct?
DCA 把血液带走，是吗？
不好意思，再说一遍可以吗？你的
Excuse
翻译
me？
我听得不是很清楚，可以连贯性的告诉我一下吗？
好的，
谢谢。
好的。那你刚刚你一开始是同意，有配合有同意给他们血液样板，但是最后你是没有把血液样板给他们带走，对吗？
因为在
Because
抽完血以后，
after the blood
我的医
sample,
生和专家
my doctor
他们没有证
and
件
the
没有
expert
资质
they so they don't have
非常可怕的行为
authorization of later and identification and proven identification because of having blood sample has been collected with 3 people of a DCO which does not have proven identification. So we are afraid we cannot guarantee there was no mistake. It will be relabeling, renamed during the way.
Do you please turn to your statement at tab 5?
请你翻到你的第5。
是那个 TAB 5吗？
Is it TAB 5?
你是贴第5吗？
And if you could turn to the top of page 10. You see, in the
可以有人过来跟我确认一下，翻的这个对吗？可以确认是
Can
这个。
someone come to assist me to ensure if I got the right page?
我
it
确
is
认一下。
paragraph 25 on the bottom of the previous page. And so the first line says in English that the DCO said they needed to leave with the blood sample, correct?
DCO 在这一项当中 ，DCO 他有说，他们必须要把血液样板带走。
不好意思，这个26跟你这个翻译的好
Excuse
像
me？
不是很一样。
26
10页，第10页。
is not coordinated to the
是的。
question.
It's the top line of text on page 10.
Here. Top line text. At this time must be the bottom here. 啊，9月的第25啊。At this time. At this time 啊哈，9月的第。
which is, it's the text above the paragraph 25, exactly.
If you allow me, I'll just... You have to read the chain.
问题25第9页。
翻到了。
Yes, yes, I got it.
So in paragraph 25,
25页这一条
you say that the DCO
DCO
said they needed to leave with the blood sample,
带着
correct?
他们的血液样板，对吗？
对他当时是
Yes.
说了他要带走。
She did mention she need to take it away. But my specialty, expert, will mention if they don't have proven authorization, say they are not allowed to bring them away.
So in that same paragraph, you then said, so I complained and told them they were not entitled to take away the blood samples, correct?
你有抱怨他们没有让他们不要带走血液。
什么？
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah, can you please repeat the question again, please?
In that same paragraph, you state that you complained to the DCO and told them that they were not entitled to take away your blood sample, correct?
没有资格拿到你的样本，血液样本，是对吗？
因为抽血的血检官不能提供他的执业证书。
Because the blood collector assistant, she was not able to show me the identification and certification to prove she is legally to do the blood test in my city. So this is a very dangerous legal issue. So under these circumstances, asking you, how can I be able to allow her to bring away my blood test, blood sample?
And then in paragraph 28, at a later point, you also said that you insisted on keeping the blood sample, correct?
你有坚持说你会保留你的血液样本，对吗？28，第10页28。
我自始至终没有说我坚持，我们
I never say I insist. It's really based on my professional team and the doctor mentioned about if they are able to approve their qualified identification and they can bring. But the thing is, they are not able to prove all the qualified document. And I told them, I can wait for you to show me and bring all the document to show me, to approve. You are authorized to do so. But the DCO was really insisting this is not necessary. I was wondering, actually, we have a better solution to solve out this problem, but why she reject my proposal?
You say in paragraph 29, I'm sorry, you say in paragraph 30 that you randomly picked a bottle and handed it to the guard?
不对，首先这个瓶子
First of all, the bottle was not collected by me. The bottle is by BCA. She prepared and she tried to open it. And then she also tried another way to open from the bottle of the blood sample bottle. So BCA, she provided for us.
But the English translation,
Mrs. Sands was to ask a question.
Thank you. It's just, Mr. Yang, on going back to paragraph 28, if you could have a look at paragraph 28 of that statement. We've just had a look at it. If you could just refresh your memory, have another look. It says in the English translation, I therefore insisted on keeping the sample.
回到了。
Yes, I found it.
Very good. It says in the English translation, I therefore insisted on keeping the blood sample. But when Mr. Reichner asked you that, as I understood, I thought I heard you say you didn't insist. And I'm just wondering if you could explain to us very precisely, were you the one taking the decisions here, or was it, as your paragraph proceeds to say, Bajen, who was telling you what to do? If you could just explain to us what exactly was happening.
Sorry, 哪个白先生我听不明白。
I think it's Dr. Ba.
是吧？巴医生，是巴医生让你。
Okay, Mr. Reichner, you can go ahead, please.
等一下，是巴医生。
No, sorry, I didn't get an answer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear about the answer to the question. Are you saying
你是说
I can go more slowly if that's helpful?
我说的更慢一点，如果能帮我
Is your testimony
你是说
说得更清楚一点，然后我就是断断续续，我听不明白我。
We're on paragraph 28.
我们现在在第28段落，
At paragraph 28, you say, I insisted.
我是强调，就是
Now you seem to be saying
我坚持，
that Dr. Barr insisted.
但是你现在说是巴医生坚持，
Could you tell us if it was you who insisted or Dr. Barr who insisted?
你现在能不能告诉我们是你坚持还是巴医生坚持？
不是我坚持，
It wasn't me.
是巴正和他的老师，他的
It's
专
because
家
the Dr.
经
Ba
过多
and
年
the
从事
professionist,
性问题工作，
after
得
being
出的
working
结
for
论。
many years with this issue
因为
with
我是一名运动员，
anti-doping
我在
panel, because
发
I'm
生
an
一个这
athlete.
么紧急的情况时，我
So
第一时间
it's an
是向我的
emergency
领导
cases for
和专
me.
家进行了
So
汇报。
for me, I
所以说
need
所有
to
的决
report
定
it
是
to
在
my
他们的指
doctor
示下
and
来
my
完成的。
leaders to follow their advice.
Thank you.
谢谢你。
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have the same issue in paragraph 30.
在第30
In your statement from October of 2018, it says, I randomly picked a bottle. Then in your later statement, tab 8, it says, Bazen randomly picked a bottle. And I am informed by my colleague that the Chinese language was changed in that paragraph between the two statements. So who picked the bottle?
这些句子后来是被改编的。那最后是谁拿到瓶子？
我们没有人去主动去拿那个瓶子，
No one
是血
tried
检
to
官
take the
主动从箱子里
bottles. It's
血液
BCA
碰那个箱子。
herself, she picked up the bottle and intend to open it. And afterwards, she realized she shake it. She saw on the bottom of the bottle, maybe you can try to find a way to open it
From the bottom。
from the bottom.
But my question is, you
所以我的问题
changed
是
You changed your written statement.
你自己所写的
In your first statement, you said, I randomly picked a bottle. And then you changed it to say, Bazen picked a bottle. So why did you change your statement from I picked the bottle to Bazen picked the bottle?
我们任何人没有去改变
None of
我们
us
说的证
have
言和证
changed
词
our，statement.
因为自始至终是血检官从箱子里面随便拿了一个交到我们的手上。
It's
那
the
他当然是
BCA
随便一个
should
交
bring
到巴正
over
手上。
a box and hand it to Dr. Ba.
5 minutes, Mr. Reichler.
5分钟，
5 minutes left.
剩下5分钟。Mr.
Did you change your statement? Did you change your statement from you picked the bottle to Bazen picked the bottle because you wanted to put more responsibility on your doctor than for you again?
不是，我们今天在这里举行公开听证会的目的就是，我没有任何隐藏，我可以毫无保留地告诉大家。
To reveal all the detail.
And that's an important detail. So why did you change the statement from I picked the bottle to Bazen picked the bottle?
是一个非常重要的细节，你为什么把自己的血液改成白医生拿了瓶子的血液？
我们所有的证据都是真实、
All
非常可
of
靠。
our
相反，
evidence
是
and
主检官
exhibitions.
和血检官
On the other
在查
hand,
看了我们提
as
供的证据
DCO
和大量
and
视频以后
BCA,
在不
they
断
have
地
tried to
篡改
collect
他
a
们
lot
的
of
言辞。
evidence to
你可以回去自己
remodify
去
our
查看这个视
statement.
频
You
主
can
检
go
官从
forward
一
back.
开始到达我
The
的小区开
DCO
始
arrived
就开始在
my
说谎。
house. She
直到最
started to
后。
lie until the end.
Okay, I think you can conclude.
你可以结束。
If you maybe you have a short question, last short question.
最后几个问题可以问。
In paragraph 33, you say that the DCO told you she needed to take pictures and keep the samples even after the container had been broken. So you knew even after the bottle was broken that the DCO wanted to keep the samples.
不好意思，再翻一遍可以吗？
You said,
翻译再翻一遍，翻译再翻一遍。
我知道，但是我需要知道那个再听到那个问题。
Excuse me, can you repeat this question again? Slowly, thank you.
you say in your statement
在第33
at paragraph 33 that the DCO told you she needed to take pictures and keep the samples after the container was broken.
就是瓶子碎了以后，它
So you knew
保留，
even after the bottle was broken
就是瓶子碎了，
that the DCO wanted to keep the samples.
是 DCO 想保留这个瓶子。
首先，
First of all,
如果要拍照，
if
还要
I
留下
need to take a picture, she need to have a later authorization and also have a certificate of a nursing. Because as a, regarding to my privacy and respectful, and I want to tell you, the whole world and everybody might consider the blood sample is broken, as not exists anymore. But I want to tell you, the blood sample up to now still will keep it. You can check from all the videos, from the clips, because I really want to keep all of the evidence to be able to be re-examined, to be checked again anytime.
Thank you very much. We move to FINA, please. Mr. Vitto, you have the floor. 15 minutes.
I do not have any question to Mr. Yang.
Okay. If you don't mind, we go back to the counsel of Mr. Sun Yang. 10 minutes.
I don't think I need 10 minutes, but I'll be brief. Mr. Sun Yang, you were asked questions about a FINA letter that was shown to you on the evening of the 4th of September. Can you turn to tab 31 in the bundles that are before you? So I think it's in file number 2. Sorry, file number 3. Is this the letter of authority that was shown to you on the night of the 4th of September 2018?
对，对，是的
Yes,，
只是
indeed.
我看到了，这只是授权
Just I saw
IDTM 的
the
授权
IDTM,
书
the
但是我不
letter
知
of
道他们
authority
来的人是
later,
谁，来
but
的人是否
I
有支
didn't
持，我
know
完全不知道，所以
who
我没
they
有办法
are
信任。
or what the identification they could prove me, so I was not able to trust them.
我可以补充一个问题吗？补充一个
Can
回答
I,。can I explain one thing
Yes,
supplementary?
please go ahead.
如果说单单仅凭
If only
单单仅凭一份这个证据，
based on this piece of evidence,
我们在座的所有
and which means
随便找两个人
today
运动员去进行检查，
everybody here they have right to accuse the athlete. If the athlete doesn't
是不公平的，因为
follow up the
我们所有人以为
instruction, this is not fair to the athlete because it's not equal. But at the meantime, the DCO was not qualified
一名优秀的运动员
to prove me all the documents. So as an athlete, I'm feeling very bad with this incident without being respected.
With regard to this letter, your name is not on it, is it?
在这上面你的名字不出现，是不
You don't see your name here, do you?
看不到你的名字，是对吗？
我没有看到我的名字，对。
I did not.
And you don't see the name of the DCO
看不到
or the BCA or the DCA.
DCA 的名字是不是？
看不到，完全看不到，甚至在
I
这一
did
次
not.
检查之前，
Not
我
at
都
all.
不确认主检官的名字
Even
是否是
before
叫这个名字。
this hearing, I wasn't even sure who was the DCO, DCE, because I haven't been shown with all the proven authority and identification. And on the later, I did not see anyone's name on it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yang. I have a question to you. The first question is, how many times in your career did you provide blood samples?
在我的职业生涯里
During
面
my，swimming
上百
career,
次，
it's more than
多
100
到我自
times.
己都已经记不清楚了，而且在
Even I
那一
lost
天
track
晚
of
上
counting.
检查之前，
During that night,
结束了6天的
I just finished a trip in Jakarta. During the 6 days of competition, I have been exempt for 5 days. The second day, I back to Hangzhou. I also follow the checkup. So during the competition, I will stay on the podium as an excellent athlete. So each competition, I have been through strictly with all the checkup. And this time, the DCO is the only one who I file complaint for. And the rest of the DCO, the whole process and the experiences were really friendly and nicely. They didn't lie to anything to me as an athlete, so I'm very happy to cooperate with them. But unfortunately, during the night, this DCO wasn't did the same thing.
Yes, thank you very much for this answer. And during the past experiences you had on sample collection, do you remember what kind of documents were shown to you? Because you just said, I had no problems at all in the past, only this time. Was there a difference in that documentation?
当然有，因为我们中国反兴奋剂的这个标准是在全世界
Because anti-doping
高于任何的标准。我们
authorization, we have a high standard, so we have been well educated to follow the authority
体育的公平性，
and to be fair. So during the previous
卡片一样的一个身份信息，
checkup, we always see the identical car which has been authorized by FINA. And also, we can see the company has been authorized liquidation to be authorized to do the inspection of a blood sample. But during that night, unfortunately, I did not see any information of this.
Okay, for me it's enough. Mrs. Sands wants to ask a question, and then Mr. Subiotto. Please, Romano.
Mr. Yang, hello. When the DCO presented herself, you agreed to submit to a blood sample collection process. Is that correct?
对，我接受，因为我要
Yes,
配合。
I accept it because I need to follow their instruction.
I assume from that in your mind, the documents that, or the document that was presented to you before the blood was taken was sufficient to confirm that the person was entitled to collect blood from you. Is that correct?
不对，
No, it's not right.
他没有他的职业
He didn't show his certificate to prove she's nurse. She is able to move from city to city to do the blood collecting. So it's considered is not useful information for them.
What I'm trying to understand is the process that you went through in sitting down and agreeing to have your blood taken, and only later raising issues concerning the authorization of the officials.
是这样的，在一开始
Actually, in the beginning, it was smoothly, but unfortunately, during the preparation of a blood collecting sample, the DCA started filming with mobile phone. Due to the DOC has been filed complaint for, and this time, she's coming with her work assistance without proven identification. And plus, he started filming. And during the international competition, all the filming is not accepted. However, I'm your fan, so today I'm coming here to see you, so I would like to take a picture. But from my point of view, this is really ridiculous because it really disqualified and unprofessional, because I cannot trust on her, and afterwards, all their proven document, the later authority and the personal behavior can be conduct to very serious consequence. She needed to prove she's able to process the blood collecting in my city, in my canton. So if you can prove me more information, certification, therefore, everyone has seen these three persons.
So if I understand correctly, when the DCA's behavior, when she started taking pictures and videos, caused you to question her credentials, and more broadly to question everyone's credentials, including the DCO's credentials. So that's the process that happened that night. It just wanted to understand that. Thank you.
一遍问题可以吗？中文，谢谢。
Can you please repeat the question again?
So if I understand correctly, it is the DCA's behavior, more particularly her taking videos and pictures, that caused you to question her credentials, and then more broadly the credentials of the DCO and the BCA. Is that correct?
Actually, the whole accident, it should be conducted by DCO, because when someone starts filming, the DCO should have stopped all the following checkup, because all the competition we have a 2 meters, 400 meters. But in case someone has issue, so if during this inspection and the DCO was asking to filming for the process, how are you able to trust them to follow up?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. I wonder if you could have a look at tab number 13. Mr. Meakin, you may want to go and, just to speed things up, take him to tab 13. It's the statement of Mr. Kemp. 13, 1-3. And it's the statement of Stuart Kemp, witness statement of Stuart Kemp. Witness bundle, tab 13, witness statement of Stuart Kemp, and it's really the last couple of pages. And I think it's only in English, so it would be appropriate to assist Mr. Young, make sure he understands it properly. I don't want to cause any difficulties. Tab 13 of the witness statements. 1-3, the witness statement of Stuart Kemp.
Bundle 1.
Bundle 1. And at page 3 of that tab is a table which has at the top 4 years, 2016, 2017, 2018. Do you see that? Do you see that, Mr. Yang? Mr. Beacon, I wonder if you could just help him. It's obviously an anxious moment, and we just want to make things as simple as possible.
What is 3? 2?
This one.
Do you see that table?
看到了，但我
And do you see on the left-hand side, 6 names down, you have IDTM. Do you see that?
看到了。
And that is the total number of samples that they have taken. On the right-hand side, you see grand total 64,267. Do you see that?
看到了。
Great. And now if you could go to the next page, if you could turn to the next page, and these are your samples. Do you recall you were asked earlier about the number of samples you had given, and these are the samples that you've given between 2012 and 2018. You see that?
我看到了。
Yes, I do.
And in the bottom right-hand corner of the top table, there is a grand total 180 samples.
对对对。
右脚下面的是有这个数字180，你看到。
180 is, of course, a special number for anyone who is an aficionado of the sport of darts.
就是对所有的专业运动员的这个次数是挺重要的。
这个是全部是我个人的，对吗？
This is my personal record, is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
我觉得很惊讶，可能这么多这。
Myself even surprised with this.
It's a lot of samples. And as between those 180 samples, as you can see, if you go above, you see the first line says in comp, which means in competition. And if you go to the end, it says 63 samples in competition.
就是在比赛当中有63提供过63的样本。
You see that. And then if you go down,
下面
you see out of competition.
外
And on the far right-hand side, 117 samples.
117样本看到的。
看到了。
Yes, I did.
Great. So out of 180 samples, 63 are in competition, 117 are out of competition. And that is a lot of samples.
180样本里
Now,
，63
if you
是
go back to the top
赛内
line,
，117是赛外。
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in, you will see IDTM, the name of the Sample Collection Authority. Do you see that?
Can you please repeat the question again?
On the top line is the name of the many different sample collection authorities who've taken your samples, and one of them is IDTM. Thank you, Mr. Meakin, for just... I think it'll be quicker.
拿到你样本的这些组织的名称。
And if you could just stay with him and just go down, we see that
第一行
IDTM have taken a total
看到了。
of 60 out of competition samples
然后就是 IDTM 是赛外拿到
between
了
2012 and 2018. Do you see that?
12到2018年，你看到的。
看到了。
Yes, I did.
Good. And Mr. Yang, does that number of 60 seem about right? It's roughly, does it seem correct?
杨先生，就是对你来说，这个60这个数字是准确吗？
这个因为上百次检
Because
测，
over 100 times
我只是需要做的是确
checked
认
up
做好我作为名誉运动员
I just want to make sure I already done what I have to do and supposed to do. Despite if they want to come to check up twice a day, I will still cooperate with them.
Very good. Thank you for that. But my question
谢谢
was,
谢谢。
我的问题是，
is 60 samples by IDTM about accurate in your memory? Is that figure correct?
在你记忆中，就是记忆当中 ，IDTM 拿到60样本是准确吗？
这个我
I'm not quite sure. As so many times I have been checked by all the different association authorities. So I just want to say, because I'm qualified athlete, because I do what I'm supposed to do.
Let me put the question another way.
我换个
You
方
are
式问你
familiar with IDTM, are you? You've come across
对
IDTM
比较熟
before.
悉是吧？
我不熟悉，因为对于
No, I'm not really familiar. Because for each of them, as long as they have later authority, so I do as what I supposed to do.
Let me, I mean, the evidence before us is that you've had 60 samples taken by IDTM, and I hear what you say.
拿到了60样本。
But as far as we're aware, the evidence before us is the only
证据，
time you have
唯一的
got yourself into a situation where you have not wanted the sample to be given is this case. In every other case,
就是你不
it seems there has not been a problem of this kind. Is that correct?
你不想提供样本的唯一的时候，就是在那个时候，是对吗？其他时候都说 OK。
错，很遗憾是
That's wrong.
所有
Unfortunately,
检查我的都是有有效资质
all
和职业证，具有
all association, all authority who they came to me, they all have proven authorization and with certification. But unfortunately this time, only this time, I'm not able to take these responsibilities.
To the best of your recollection,
在你
on the other 59 occasions when IDTM took a sample, Did they show you any documents that were different?
当然，全部都是
Of
有
course,
效
they
合法的
do have qualified documents and authorizations.
而且检测的次数
And
并不能说
the number of
检测系统
examining,
或者检
it
测的人
doesn't
就是
mean
正确的。
the authorization or the person who is doing the
唯一的一组检查人员
inspection are all correct, because one out of 100 group, they might have one group has something wrong.
And my final question,
最后的问题是，
on the 60 occasions
在这
when you
60
gave
次
an
的
out of
机会
competition sample
你外
to
赛
IDTM,
赛外给的那个样本，
on how many occasions, approximately, was Dr. Barr present for the out of competition sample?
在赛外的样本里，巴医生多少次出现？
这个我从小到大检测的次
Well,
数
from when I was young up to now, I've been examining for too many times.
效之是我的
I just want to ensure my samples are well collected and sent it to a laboratory. If you keep asking me, when I was young up to now, how many times I do the backstroke, I cannot remember how many times, maybe over a million, thousands.
But that was not my question, Mr. Yang. My question
我
was,
的问题是，
when you give out of competition samples,
赛外
is Dr. Barr with
的
you
样本，
always,
你提供赛外的
sometimes,
样本的时
never?
候，巴医生是跟你在一起，还是有时候还是在外有时候？
有时候
Yes, sometimes.
How often?
次数多少？
这个我不确定，但是有时候
This
在
I'm
有时
not
候不
quite
在
sure. Sometimes there, sometimes not.
I do want to ask you a little more. I mean, more often than not, is he there, or is it only very occasionally
他
that
在
he
你
is
时
there?
间更多的，还是他不在的更多？
这个我自己也不记得，但是
Regarding this, I
因为
lost
我们常年
track
在
of
一起
this
他有在我
because
身
I've
边 也
been
有不在我
together
身
for
边
a
因
long
为
time.
他有
Sometimes
自己的
he's
家
he's
庭
around,
他有自己的孩
sometimes
子
he's
自己的
not.
老
He has
婆
his family.
对 OK
So
Thank,
therefore,
thank you very much, Mr. Yang.
谢谢。
Thank you very much. We can close. We can take a break, 15 minutes. Thanks, Mr. Yang, for coming and for answering to our questions.
谢谢。
witness Mr. Stuart Kemp, who is not yet in the room. Please, somebody could accompany Mr. Kemp in the room. Thank you, Mr. Kemp. You can take your seat. And first of all, as I said to the other witness, you know already, I suppose, but I repeat, you should tell us all the truth, talking about facts, event, not about impressions, speculations, and so on and so forth. With that, I give the floor. I suppose Mr. Wagner will be first to ask question. Oh,
it's
no,
me.
Mr. Young, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ask question, please.
Mr. Kemp, have you reviewed your witness statement that was submitted in this matter?
Yes, I have.
Do you want to make any changes to it?
No, I do not.
Okay. We only have 10 minutes. So can you give the panel a brief description of your expertise related to the issue of doping control notification?
Sure. My current role at the World Anti-Doping Agency is I'm the Deputy Director of Standards and Harmonization. Prior to that, I managed Wada's testing program, so have experience with managing several anti-doping organizations and the way that they conduct doping controls worldwide. Prior to that, and my experience at Wada, I worked for the Canadian Anti-Doping Agency where I managed their testing program, and that also entailed acting as a doping control officer myself. Specifically for reference to today, I've been involved with the drafting of the International Standard for Testing since all of its versions from 2009, and have also been responsible for the drafting of the guidelines related to blood sample collection, urine sample collection, as well as the training of sample collection personnel.
Is the audit function of the International Standard for Testing and Investigations also under your jurisdiction?
That's right. So our department also takes care of audits worldwide of both national anti-doping organizations and international sport federations, where we review in detail the operational practices of agencies.
And would those operational practices include notification procedures?
In many instances, yes. It's not a detail that we review in the field, but we certainly review documentation about how that's to be performed.
Okay. If I was a code signatory like FINA or the Swiss Anti-Doping Agency, and I had a question about how to interpret the, I'll call it the ISTI, the International Standard for Testing and Investigation, requirements on athlete notification. If I called WADA, who would they tell me to talk to answer that question?
They'd likely redirect you to me as having been involved with the drafting of the standard.
Okay. Then, good. Let me ask you a question. If I'm FINA and I want to give a document to IDTM authorizing them to collect samples on my behalf, do I need to name in that document the athlete that I want to have, a specific athlete that I want to have samples collected from? And do I need to name the members of the sample collection team that are going to collect those samples?
No, you do not. The IF, or FINA in this case, would need to provide general authorization that a test can be conducted under their rules. Such a document would include the rules under which, the jurisdiction under which the test was taking place, but it would be very difficult to identify a specific athlete or doping control officer that would conduct the test, given it's typically delegated to a third party. So the authorizing IF wouldn't even know who the doping control officer might be. Furthermore, it would be difficult to name the athlete in many instances. Take an in-competition testing scenario, for example, where an athlete might be selected because they came first in a race, or they were randomly selected in a race. You don't know the athlete's name until they've finished their performance. Therefore, it would be almost impossible to name the athlete in advance. Similarly, in many competitions and out-of-competition tests where multiple tests are taking place at the same time, there might be multiple doping control officers involved. and they would process a sample based on their availability when an athlete arrives at the doping control station. So for those two reasons, it may be best practice to include those types of details, but it's certainly not a requirement.
If I'm IDTM, and I have a doping control team, do I need to give the nurse phlebotomist and the chaperone, which IDTM calls the DCA, any documentation that links them back to IDTM as an agent of IDTM?
No, you do not. IDTM would need to have the general authorization from FINA or any other IF that they're working for, and then that general authorization would apply to all sample collection personnel. And in the cases of chaperones and blood collection officials, their role, their scope within the collection process is very limited, and therefore that's not necessary.
What was your role in connection with the 2014 sample collection personnel guidelines?
So our staff within our department were responsible for drafting that, and as the individual primarily involved with the drafting of the standard, I oversaw that initiative, and those guidelines are constantly being updated on a regular basis based on feedback that we get from stakeholders and to ensure that they reflect best practice.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, as I review those guidelines, they say that the chaperone and the blood collection officer should have identification that links them back to the sample collection authority. Is that right?
That's right. So again, as best practice, it would be preferable that that was the case, but for the instances I cited earlier, it may not be possible in all cases.
Then, if that was what you wrote in the guidelines, why didn't you put the same language in the mandatory international standard?
Right. So as is the case with all of the standards under the World Anti-Doping Code, you have basic requirements, and then the level 3 documents, the guidelines, are there to help implement practice. Obviously, we'd like to promote best practice, but we recognize that different anti-doping organizations and sample collection agencies worldwide implement those requirements differently, and that's why we constantly adjust those best practice documents, but we did not want that to be a requirement.
Based on your experience, are there a significant number of sample collection bodies, either anti-doping organizations or third-party service providers, who would not follow the procedures that Sun Yang's team are saying are required under the ISTI?
Yeah, as I mentioned, practices vary. The important element in terms of complying with the International Standard for Testing and Investigations is that the general authorization is available to all sample collection personnel, but no, there need not be individual authorization or accreditation for all personnel.
Okay. Have you reviewed the FINA letter? It's at Volume 3, Tab 8.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And is that a sufficient authorization from FINA to IDTM to collect samples from swimmers, and in particular, Sun Yang?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Take a look at the Wada letter at Volume 3, Tab 25. What is that?
So this is a similar authorization letter. In this case, it would be a test authorized by the World Anti-Doping Agency. Again, it's a general authorization letter that is not specific about the doping control personnel who will be collecting the sample, because WADA would subcontract the tests. We don't conduct testing ourselves. and therefore we have no idea who the doping control officer will be that will conduct these tests, only that they'll do so in accordance with our agreement, which includes adherence to the ISTI. This letter may be a little bit more specific about the type of sports, but again, it's a general letter that does not include the DCO or the name of the athlete.
Okay. And in the bottom of that letter, it refers to information to be provided by the DCO. What's the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is that you know that you're dealing with a real individual, somebody with official identification, not even an identification from a sample collection agency, but something that's widely recognized, like a passport, like a driver's license, something where the athlete has the opportunity to validate that this is a real person, and should they be documenting their concerns about the process, they have a record of who this individual was.
Okay. Have you seen the identity card issued by IDTM to the DCO in this case?
Yes, I have, and that's here in the documents as well.
And would that satisfy the requirement you've just described?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only would it, but it, again, would be best practice.
Okay. Let me take you to the ISTI. And particularly to Article 5.4.2, subsection B. I think.
Which tab is that, please?
It would be Volume 1, Tab 4. Or, I had the damn thing.
That's not the right one in the witness bundle. Is it in the witness bundle?
Witness bundle, tab 4, witness bundle 2.
Witness bundle 2, tab 4.
Yeah, this is your last question, Mr. Young. Since the time expired, you will have another round of 5 minutes at the end. Please conclude. On the question, Andy will answer.
My question is, I would like you to take me through Article 5.4.2 and Article 5.3.3 and explain the drafting intent that goes with those words.
Sure. Well, starting with 5.4.2, the element here is about ensuring proper notification of an athlete, that they're aware of their rights, their responsibilities in the doping control process, and that begins with the individual notifying the athlete of their selection for doping control. Be it a chaperone or a doping control officer, they must identify themselves, articulate the rights and responsibilities of the athlete. That includes knowing who has authorized the test itself, and if need be, they would make reference to the official documentation under which they've been authorized to notify the athlete for selection.
Okay, and in sub B, identify themselves. Is that meant to apply to anyone other than the chaperone or the doping control officer?
It would be the individual responsible for the actual notification process, which may be the doping control officer or the chaperone, but only one individual.
And is this the only place in the ISTI where the doping control team is required to show papers to the athlete?
It's the only place where it's required, but of course, if the athlete wished to see it at any point, they'd be entitled to do so, but it would be the same document that was provided here under 533.
That refers to Article 5.3.3?
Yes.
Look at that quickly.
I have to object.
Please.
First of all, it's a leading question, and you said it was his last question, and I think he's had about 5.
Yeah, maybe, Mr. Young, you can kindly conclude, and then I will pass back the floor to you after the other counsels have counter-interrogated. Please, counsel of Mr. Sun Yang. Mr. Vitto, who is taking the floor, or Mr. Mikin? 15 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Kemp, my name's Ian Meakin. I'm counsel for Sun Yang. I'm going to ask you some questions based on your expertise and your witness statement. I refer particularly to paragraph 7 and 8 of your witness statement that you filed here, which is in the witness bundle, tab 13. I don't know if you have it, but it's witness bundle 1, tab 13.
Thank you.
You got it? And you see paragraph 7, you say, the documentation shown by the sample collection personnel satisfies the notification requirements set forth in the ISTI. You see that? So you've been shown what we understand to be what was shown to Mr. Sun Yang on the night of the 4th of September. Is that correct?
Yes, the general letter from FINA.
Okay. And in paragraph 8, you say that the ISTI does not require this additional documentation to be carried by or shown to the athlete during the sample collection session. You see that?
I'm not referring to the letter. We're referring to additional documentation
Yeah,
related to
in
the
paragraph 8, that's right. You're referring to additional documentation which may or may not be shown, as the case may be.
Correct.
That's your view, if
No,
I
it's not
understand
my
it
view.
correctly.
It's the standard.
Yeah, I'm going to
requires
come back
7.
to that, but I just wanted to have you confirm that there's nothing there that you want to change.
No.
Okay, so can you now take it's binder 2, you had it on direct, it's binder 2, tab 4.
Sorry, there's no tab 4 in binder 2.
It's tab 4 out of 4.
Yes, thank you.
And if you can turn to page 81. 81,
Yep.
which is Annex H, sample collection personnel requirements. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And if you see at H2, it talks about scope, and it says sample collection personnel requirements start with the development of the necessary competence for sample collection personnel and end with the provision of identifiable accreditation. So I just signal identifiable accreditation because now I'm going to put some questions regarding what constitutes identifiable accreditation.
Sure.
Okay. If you can stay in tab 4, but go back to page 26.
Of the standard.
Yeah, in the same tab. And in the middle of the page, you'll see a paragraph which starts with the bold title, Sample Collection Personnel. So that's page 26. So I know you've got it, but I'm waiting for the panel to get it as well. It's good. It says, this is a collective term for qualified officials authorized by the sample collection authority to carry out or assist with duties during the sample collection session. You see that?
Yes, I do.
So, would it be fair to say that to interpret carrying out would be referring to a DCO or a BCO, and assist would be referring to a DCA or a BCA? Would you agree with that?
It would be dependent on the specific role that they're playing within the collection process.
Okay, I accept that. So, for example, a blood officer is there to actually take blood, whereas a DCA is there to assist because that's his title. And in the present case, that was the urine assistant, if you recall, who was an assistant. So he's assisting, but the DCO is actually carrying out. Okay?
Right, they're responsible.
Okay, and now I'll take you to page 44 of the same tab. And I'll take you to paragraph 5.3.3, which starts with sample collection personnel. You see that?
Yes, I do.
I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I'm going to read it out for the record. sample collection personnel shall have official documentation provided by the sample collection authority, evidencing their authority to collect a sample from the athlete, such as an authorization letter from the testing authority. DCOs shall also carry complementary identification, which includes their name and photograph, i.e. identification card, from the sample collection authority, driver's license, etc., etc. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Now I'd like to take you to tab 56, which is in a different binder. It's in the binder just to your left, I think, tab 56. Actually, no, it's in binder number 4. It's the thin one.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first exhibit in that bundle. This is a letter of authorization. You would agree with that? Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a letter of authorization, but it is
well, that's what
a
it's
document
called,
that could
isn't
be
it?
used as such, yes.
Okay, so I accept your answer. And this actually is a letter of authorization for the testing of the athlete Sun Yang. Right? And here we see that the DCO is mentioned. Can you see that?
Yes, I do.
Is that normal?
As I said before, there's different ways to implement the requirement. This would be one. Some organizations include the athlete's name. Many do not, however, because in most instances, more than one athlete is being tested at a time. And
Right.
in those instances, we don't want to disclose other athletes that are being tested for
Right, but
privacy reasons.
we know that the testing that took place with Sun Yang was an out-of-competition test. Okay, so it's not about somebody who's just finished a race and he's being
I'm answering
tested.
the question in very general terms.
Yeah, I know you did. I'm aware of that, but we're talking about an out-of-competition test, and this was the authorization which FINA gave with regard to the testing of Sun Yang, and we see that the DCO is mentioned. So I come back to my term that I used earlier, which is identifiable accreditation, which is, we can see that, you know, the name of the doping control officer is mentioned in this doping control authorization. You see that?
I see that.
Yeah, and we don't see the name of the BCA or the DCA. They're not mentioned in this form.
Absolutely, nor do they need to be.
Right. Well, they could be, but your evidence says, if I understand you correctly, that they don't need to be.
I'm articulating that the standard only requires that the name of the organization authorizing the test is required.
Right. So, so how would you show to the athlete that the DCA or the BCA, or both of them, were in a possession of identifiable accreditation?
Well, as you
let's arguendo imagine that this form had been shown to Sun Yang on the night, right?
Right.
Now, it wasn't, but, and I mean, I appreciate you weren't there, you're here as an expert, but it's not contested what was shown to Mr. Sun Yang on the night. But arguendo, had that been shown to him on the night, in order to have identifiable accreditation for the other officers, there would have to be some additional documentation provided, correct?
To be very clear, sample collection personnel is a general term that refers to all personnel involved in the collection process. The standard only requires that the doping control officer has named evidence to their accreditation. Therefore, having reference to presenting, I can't remember the term that you used earlier, the relevant authorization or the relevant accreditation, it would be only relevant to those that are required to have it, and that's the doping control official.
Okay, now can you turn to tab 52, which is in the different binder. It's in the binder with the most numbered documents, which I think is file number 3. If you can turn to tab 52, these are the Wada guidelines.
Yep.
And if you can, so can you turn to page 17 of that document, please? 17.
Yes.
You have it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and you see that the main heading is evidence of accreditation. So when I was talking about identifiable accreditation, here we have the Wada guidelines. The second paragraph begins authorization letter. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says, in the absence of a sample collection authority issued photo ID, the chaperone may use government-issued photo ID accompanied by a sample collection authority authorization letter. You see that?
I do.
Right. So, based on the document I showed you before, which was the FINA authorization to test Sun Yang,
Yep.
where the DCO's name is mentioned, but the BCA and the DCA's name is not mentioned. Based on this, which is the definition used in authorization letter, what's required, is it not, is that either, because this is about chaperones, this is not about the DCO, this is about the chaperones, so they're the people assisting the DCO. So either the BCA and the DCA have to have had a sample collection authority photo ID, which would be, in the present case, a IDTM card with their photograph on it, or they would have to be included in the letter of authorization. You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
No, I wouldn't agree with that at all. I strongly disagree with that. You're making reference to a guideline document that outlines best practice. This is not a requirement, and if you read the scope section on page 4 of the same document, it clearly outlines as much and says that if there's any discrepancy between this guideline and the IST prevails, and of course that's because that's where the requirements are held.
Okay, so I'll just stop you there, if I may, because the whole issue I'm trying to get to is identifiable accreditation. Now, we can have a different view on what that constitutes, and it's for this learned panel to decide, you know, what it is, but I just need your help based on your expertise and on the evidence in the file,
Right.
and what happened when Sun Yang was notified. And that's why we're all here, because as you know, the testing was aborted, and you know that there's been consequences arising as a result of, you know, what happened on that night. So, can I now take you to tab 31, which is in the same binder. You have it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, this is the letter of authority which was shown, which was FINA's letter of authority which appointed or delegated testing to IDTM. You see that? And that just, I think you know this, but that was what was shown to Sun Yang on the night. Okay?
Okay.
And then if you can go over the page to tab 30, that was the other, those were the other documents that were shown to Sun Yang on the night. Okay? So we've got the DCO's IDTM card, we've got a nursing certificate, and we've got an ID. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, over the page again to tab 31, in this letter of authority, there's no mention of the officers who were going to conduct the test, is there?
As is not required, correct.
And there's no mention of the athlete either.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Miken, you have 1 minute, 1 minute and a half.
Last question. You refer in your witness statement to customary practice. You refer in your witness statement to customary practice. You mentioned best practices just now, but you're talking about customary practice. Is that a term that's used in the ISTI rules?
No, I think I used the term customary just to imply that there are different practices for implementing the same requirement.
Right, and it's not in the Wada code or the Wada guidelines either, is it?
The word customary?
Yeah, customary practice.
No, the ISTI is very much based on the requirements themselves, not on customary practice. I'm merely just trying to outline in my statement that there are different ways of doing things, and the way that IDTM conducted this test is customary practice or usual practice.
Okay, so the answer is no, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the FINA Council, Mr. Vitto, like to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will first have a question, a follow-up question on what you said before. You said that the Chaperoned and the BCO have a limited scope of activity during the sample collection. Could you please explain us what the BCA in the case at hand would have had to do if he had to perform his duties?
Sure. So the blood collection official, under the standard and under the guidelines, their primary role is to perform venipuncture, to collect the blood sample from the athlete and provide any aftercare that would be required.
Just my question is that in the case at hand, the chaperone, what would have it been its role in the case at hand?
The role of the chaperone?
Yeah, the BCA.
Sure. I'm not privy to all the details of this particular case beyond what I've read, but chaperones always have the involvement of either notifying an athlete and or witnessing the passing of a urine sample, all under the supervision of the qualified doping control officer.
And what do you mean by passing of the sample?
So this would be a role for the chaperone or the doping control officer when and if the athlete provides a urine sample, that they are witnessing the passing of that sample.
Okay. And for the BCO, what is its role?
As I mentioned, their role is limited to venipuncture, collecting the physical blood specimen, and providing any necessary aftercare.
But do you think that it is really limited activities, or is it not the main activities?
When
and the more sensitive for the athlete?
When I refer to being limited, I mean that those are the scope of their activities within the broader doping control process.
But you accept that it's a sensitive part of the sample collection process?
Absolutely. The entire process is a sensitive process.
And don't you think that the athlete has the right to be sure that these persons have been trained, educated, and that have been appointed by the sample collection authority?
They have the right to know who is conducting the sample and, the sample collection, and that's why the authorization letter includes those details so that any concerns can be raised with that organization.
Okay. Now let's turn to the general letter of authority. This is tab. If the testing authority is also the sample authority, so this document should not be shown. So the authorization documentation is only the DCO showing its IDTM ID card.
If the testing authority was the same as the sample collection agency, such documentation would still be required. It just wouldn't be making reference to a third party. It would be referencing itself as having the responsibility to collect samples.
Now, can you please turn to tab 56? This is the thin binder.
Yes.
So could you please explain us what is the purpose of this document?
So this is a generic authorization letter that can be used. So it's a non-mandatory document that can be used. Many organizations, when they plan tests, they use what's referred to as the Anti-Doping Administration and Management System. So it's an online tool for housing doping control information. If an organization wishes, they can generate a template authorization letter that pulls information from atoms on the date range of the test, the type of samples to be collected, who is to be tested, and so on. So it's a tool that Wada provides for ADOs to use, but it's a non-mandatory document.
Okay. And who are the addressees of this document?
I beg your pardon?
Who are the addressees of this
Who are
document?
the addressees? This would be provided to whoever is responsible for collecting the sample. So if this was generated by FINA, they would provide it to the service provider collecting samples.
Yes, but the first box, it's written to. So who are the addressees?
So in this case, it could be shown to athletes, coaches, administrators, and athlete support personnel. So again, this refers to the best practice that our other council referred to in terms of providing more detailed information. This gives possibility to that.
Okay, so according to best practice, this document would be shown to the athletes or his entourage.
It could be in appropriate circumstances, but most often multiple athletes would be listed on such a mission order, especially in this instance where a third party is collecting samples. Most likely FINA or other IFs wouldn't provide customized letters for each athlete, but would rather all athletes being tested in a particular location or sport during a time period would have a number of athletes, and that's why it wouldn't be shown, but absolutely it could be shown to an athlete.
Okay. So you have mentioned that the practice from IDTM and other third-party providers do not have to be in accordance with the guidelines.
No, provided the requirement is met, then they have conducted their operations in accordance with the standard.
In our case, the requirements of the guidelines, the sample collection personnel guidelines in particular, were not met.
Okay.
It's a question.
Well, again, I only have reference to the documentation I've been provided, but they did not provide this level of detail. So no, the name of the athlete, the name of the doping control officer, the name of the chaperone, and the name of the BCA were not in the IF letter, but I reiterate that the IF would have no way of knowing who those individuals were when they authorized the test.
Okay, but in the guidelines, it is specifically written that the chaperone or the BCO have to have either an ID card from the sample collection authority or an authorization letter.
I hate to play semantics with a lawyer, but it says should, not shall. It's a level 3 document, which means it's not binding, it has no legal status. It would be best practice, but is not a requirement.
Do you accept that IDTM is one of the most important third-party providers for sample collection?
They are one of the most active sample collection agencies worldwide.
So IDTM practice is in contradiction with your guidelines?
I don't know the extent to which they adopt the guidelines across the board, or if this is an isolated case. I can't speak to that.
But why don't you change your guidelines if they are not respected by any of the third-party providers?
I can't say that they're not respected by all third parties. But
for this specific issue, of course.
It's been a very deliberate decision to make a distinction between what's in the requirements of the standard and what's in the suggested practice in the guideline. And as I mentioned before, it would be very onerous to put in place these types of requirements for specific types of testing scenarios. And the ISTI requirements apply to all testing, both in competition and out of competition. So by way of example, if a targeted test were to be authorized by FINA or another body, and they did not put together documentation, but rather they picked up the phone and called IDTM or another service provider and said, we need athlete X tested at this location at this time, they will not be able to put in place such documentation. Furthermore, at a major event like a FINA World Championships or at an Olympic Games, where you're testing athletes based on their performance, not based on their name, there is no possible way of putting together such documentation.
This is in competition.
And that's why the requirements
Mr.
are general.
Vito, 2 minutes left, please.
So there is a customary practice from IDTM And do you know if there is a document attesting from this customary practice?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the
Do you
question?
know if IDTM has produced or WADA has produced any regulations or rules or document that attests, that confirms the practice from IDTM? The way they
do-
operate.
So our responsibility, especially with respect to the audits that were referenced earlier, is we evaluate the practices of international federations and national anti-doping organizations. And by way of example, we did conduct an audit of FINA recently, and this practice did not come up as an issue whatsoever.
Okay. So, but has IDTM provided WADA with any document explaining how they operate?
Have they provided that to WADA?
Yeah.
We haven't asked for it because, of course, the ultimate responsibility lies with the federation that decides to employ the third-party service providers. So if anything, we would be evaluating the practices of that client, in this case, FINA.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Now back to Mr. Yang for 5 minutes.
Mr. Kemp, would you look at Article 5.3.3 of the ISTI? It's Volume 1, Tab 4 in your witness bundle. It's page 44.
Sorry, Bundle 2?
It should be Volume 1, Tab 4 of your witness bundle. From Bundle 2, yeah. Good. Suzanne, go ahead.
Sorry. Number 1 here.
It's WADA Exhibit 4 if the panel's looking for it.
Thank you.
Page 44, 5.3.3. Tell me when you've got it.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go through that, and you can tell me what was the intent in drafting. And let me just pick pieces of it. Sample personnel shall have, and then it talks about official documentation provided by the sample collection authority, evidencing their authority. What is meant by sample collection personnel shall have, whatever this is, evidencing their authority?
It means that as a collective group, the personnel involved with the testing mission must have some form of documentation providing their authorization to conduct a test. It may take the form of a letter of authority. It may take the form of the Adams-generated letter that Mr. Vito made reference to. There are different ways of implementing that practice, and that's why the provision itself refers to such as an authorization letter.
Okay. Does it mean that each of the sample personnel shall have such documentation evidencing their authority?
No, it means because sample collection personnel is a defined term and it's defined as the collective, it means that the collective must have documented authorization, not bespoke.
And you were asked about H2 in the annex, which says sample collection personnel shall have identifiable accreditation.
That's right. So those who require it under 5.4 would need to make that available, and that's the doping control officer.
Okay. It says official documentation provided by the sample collection authority, such as an authorization letter from the testing authority. That's a single document?
Yes.
Okay. Is the letter, single letter, satisfy the official documentation?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And when it says to collect a sample from the athlete, does it need to have the name of the athlete on that document?
No, it does not. And had we wished that to be the case, we would have absolutely included that within the language of the standard. But no, that is not a requirement.